So I was just looking at the videos I made yesterday, and I was so excited when I made them. And then I go back and I look at them, and they're terrible. Like the panning is like way too jerky, and my voice is flat and weak and sounds depressed. And I thought, no, what the hell? That's not what I remember, right? I remember like a whole more dynamic series of videos, and that's not that's not what came out. So we just don't see ourselves. Man, I've forgotten everything I learned from Roger Love, right? Where you're supposed to have that rising melodic voice where you're going up in pitch as you go through a sentence to convey that sense of excitement. And it wasn't there, guys. And the panning just was way too herky-jerky. And now I'm having problems with my gimbal again. Okay, let's see how we do this. All right, so thought for today. Now, often there's a whole freight train of reality bearing down on us, and we'd rather be obsessed with other people. Right? I see that as common. Reality is bearing down with us. We got financial, emotional, physical issues, and we just rather be obsessed with ourselves. No, not with ourselves, with other people, with lost relationships, with all sorts of things that we did wrong. Well, not with things we did wrong, but with what's wrong with other people. Man, is this camera tilting and weaving as much for you as it is for me? This is not the primo live stream experience that I was hoping for this morning. Right? So you notice that freight train of reality is bearing down on you, and you'd rather be obsessed with anyone else but the reality that's heading your way. I remember in therapy, I'd want to talk about what's going on with a friend of mine, and therapist says, why are you talking about her? Like, why are you bringing up her? Why is she so important to you? And I couldn't figure it out, but I'd rather get obsessed with what my friend was doing wrong than with what I was doing wrong. And then finally my therapist says, because she reminds you of you. The freight train of reality, that's what I'm thinking about this morning. And we'd rather get obsessed with how our football team's doing, right? International politics, rather than our own finances or our own job, our own prospects, our own relationships, right? So this compulsive thinking that primarily serves to distract one, all right? It's also a form of addiction, man. Seems quite maladaptive. I think so much about thinking about sports and politics. It's often to get away from the messes we've created in our own lives. I do not like the job I'm doing here. Man, I'd rather be obsessed with anything else aside from I have a tilted gimbal right now. Nope, and that even makes the tilt even worse. Come on. We're gonna get this sorted. No. Come on back. Now it's tilted too much the other way. I'd rather be obsessed with anything right now than with the crappy job I'm doing mastering my gimbal. This is not what I signed up for. Okay, here we go. So I was listening to Misha Saul's podcast, and he was interviewing this journalist this historian from Georgia, and they were talking about how Georgian identity is defined against. And I was thinking, that's true for so many identities I know. Like in large part, Australian identity is formed against British identity. American identity is developed largely against British identity. That Jewish identity, particularly in the diaspora, is developed against the dominant Gentile identity. I really am going to get this gimbal right, even if it kills me, because you deserve that. So how do Jews survive as a distinct people, having lived for 2,500 years primarily as a minority? Right, by defining themselves against the majority. Right, so Gentiles do X, but we do Y. Gentiles think this, we think that. Gentiles practice this, we practice that. And Gentiles have these traits, we have different traits. So I think it's a lot easier to define yourself against rather than define yourself for. So it sounds a lot better to define yourself, what you're for, but I don't think it really works that way. Now, in theory, like Jewish identity, Christian identity, Muslim identity, Australian identity, American identity, British identity, French identity, German identity, these are really strong. But all these identities, develop against other people, right? Nationalism primarily depends upon being against those who threaten you, right? It's a lot easier to have a strong identity against that which threatens the survival of your people, your group. So, yeah, in theory, much better to have a positive identity. I'm Jewish because I love Judaism, I love Torah, I love the message of ethical monotheism, but it just doesn't seem to work out that way, right? And theoretically, Australians could go, oh, yeah, mate, I'm an Aussie because it's just a wonderful thing to be Aussie. But it doesn't really seem to work out that way. Like, Aussies, define themselves as against China, as against New Zealand, as against England, as against Americans. So I'm not sure the theory about developing a positive identity is really going to be a dominant way to go. I think in reality, just defining what you're against is just so much stronger. Nationalism develops because you have a fear of some other group, threatening your identity, threatening the survival of your people. But I think I almost have this gimbal down right now. I'm just wandering around the central business district. Oh, and we're quite near Sydney Opera House. There's a circular quay. I'm going to be a law-abiding citizen here. So this is where you get the ferry to Manly or to all around Sydney Harbour. We've got the Sydney Town Hall just up the street. This is the central business district. Don't quite have the gimbal. Come on, mate. Come on, mate. This is really slack. This is really slack. So much to work on. I think my gimbal's simply out of battery. Okay, I can just rest here for a minute. And look out at Circular Quay out to Sydney Harbour. And there's a beautiful Sydney Harbour Bridge. All right, it's about 7:40 in the morning here.